apparently I have subscribers now, which is great. So thank you for subscribing. And I'm told by my children that I should tell you to press the subscribe button if you haven't already, if you're watching this, and press the like button, and there's a bell. I don't know what any of those things are, but if you do, then could you do them? That'd be great. So, whilst one of my little jobs is soaking away there, I thought this would probably be a good time to talk about the trailer. Yeah, this is quite a story, and I would look away if you're quite squeamish about mechanical parts. I might put a content advisory warning on. Basically, the boat was in Cleethorpes, which isn't too bad, about 40 miles away from home, mainly motorways. I live about 3 miles off the M62. At the other end it was a bit ropey because the yard from which it was being collected was through a long stretch of holiday homes with a lot of what do you call them, sleeping policemen. But I wrote in a very kind friend who I suspect for legal reasons will remain nameless, just in case. And we trundled along in his truck. The boat was already on the trailer, so it was a question really of lashing it down, putting the mast on top, making sure that was securely done, tying up the brake cables, and then we were ready to go. I think I've already introduced the idea of rules, but I'm going to make this one jump the queue and put this in at rule 1. Rule 1 is always check the trailer. All I did, in hindsight probably not enough, was to check the tyre pressures on the tyres. I should probably have done a little more digging. We set off and trundled our way through the holiday park, got through Cleethorpes itself. By that stage, one of the 3 ratchet straps looked to have snapped. So we pulled over, figured it was sensible just before we got on the motorway to have a look and make sure that there were no major issues. Tied out the broken ratchet strap, just tied that out of the way. And at this stage, 2 of the wheels on the left, or the 2 wheels on the left-hand side of the trailer, were a bit hot, but you know, it was all right. So we set back off on our merry way again. Now, the quickest route would have been to go over the Humber Bridge, but it was quite windy, so we didn't. We went along the M180 to the M18, turned up the M18, and then turned left onto the M62, and we were doing all right. You know, it was pootling along at about something. I'm not going to say what figure because I can't remember what the legal figure is, but we were doing the legal figure. Just before we got to our junction on the M62, I noticed that there were sparks coming out of the wheel, or one of the wheels on the left-hand side, and quite a lot of smoke as well. So we got off the M62, found a little lay-by on the A19 and pulled in, and yeah, the wheel was pretty hot. We poured what water we had on it, and as you can see, yeah, it was pretty hot. But figured that we were only a couple of miles from the destination, so we might as well plod on, just you know, slower, carefully. We turned into where the boat and the trailer were going to live for a couple of weeks, reversed it into place and parked up, gave each other a high five, got out, had a look, and now I'm an observant chap, and it only took me 2 minutes to notice that whereas we'd set off with 2 wheels on the left hand side of the trailer and 2 wheels on the right hand side of the trailer, we now had one wheel on the left hand side of the trailer. But weirdly, it wasn't the wheel that had been sparking and very, very hot. It was the other one. I did then get a message from a friend saying, did you just go past with a trailer? Because if so, the wheel's outside our house. So it hadn't come off on the motorway or anything silly like that. Anyway, it was there. So I left it there. And a couple of days later, I thought, right, might have to change the hubs, might have to change the bearings or whatever. So jacked it up, put some axle stands under it and set about taking the wheels, or rather the wheel that was left on the left hand side off. Now it's at this point that the always check the trailer bit comes into play, because the brakes, certainly on the left hand side, as we'll come on to, the right hand side were all right. The brakes on the left hand side, well, they weren't really brakes anymore. On the wheel that had come off, yeah, it was basically just a lump of sort of twisted metal. And on the wheel that had stayed on, there were the brakes themselves, but no actual brake pad, which isn't ideal. But then it turns out it doesn't matter anyway, because it's, I think it's over braking. Can't remember what the precise term is, where when the vehicle slows down, it pushes in a piston, which then pulls on via cables all four of the wheels brakes. But at least one of the cables wasn't working anyway, so it didn't really matter for that wheel that it didn't have any brakes, because they weren't being applied anyway. So yeah, it wasn't looking great. There were no bearings on one of the wheels. I found one later, actually. One actual bearing, not the bearings. And there was no grease, nothing really. So we had to, or rather I had to do a bit of DIY that I wasn't really anticipating. Swap one of the wheels from the right hand side, which were in good shape. I mean, I can't testify as to the brakes, but they certainly had, stuff like bearings and grease, which was more than we could say for the ones on the left hand side. Swap one of those over to the left, just so that I could move it from its current position back then, which was 200 yards away, to where it is now, which is where I'm going to be doing the refurb. And that went off almost without a hitch, but then the wheel that I've moved over almost fell off at the last minute. So that's where we are. It's got 2 wheels on it rather than 4. Probably sensible if I look at all new axles. Don't think after the journey that they've had I can trust the tyres and the wheel hubs themselves either. So there is a little bit of expense coming down the line. However, the trailer itself is solidly built, really solidly built, and they're stub axles. They're not axles that go all the way from one side to the other, and they come with relatively standard mounting plates. So it should not, touch wood, be an enormous job to swap them out. It's more the expense and the time. But as things stand, it's not something I have to rush to do. So always check the trailer. Yeah, always check the trailer. Okay, well, we'll be back onto boat stuff next episode.